going on, everybody? It's me, Manny, once again. Welcome back to DFS Zone. I got a brand new video for you guys today. We're going to discuss Week 2's top plays at running back for us here as a DFS community right here at DFS Zone. And before I get started, man, I appreciate you guys drop a like on the video. Very, very important. Let's try to get 70 likes on this video. I really appreciate those that have been dropping the likes. It shows me that obviously the work that I'm putting in, not only for myself, because this is the way I am. I basically put all the work necessary to find the best possible plays. I do all the research and I narrow it down, and then I figure why not have a YouTube channel and be able to share that information with you guys out there that don't have the time to really do the necessary research to be successful at DFS. So I appreciate that. That will show me appreciation for the work that I do, as well as the information that I'm providing to you. So if this content is of any value to you and you really like the content, definitely appreciate a like on the video. Let's try to get 70 or better. I would really appreciate that. Other than that, I know that I'm getting a lot of new viewers coming in, transitioning from WNBA as well as Major League Baseball. And Major League Baseball is still going on, but there's people that are going to play NFL DFS. And I have my viewers from WNBA, as I covered the WNBA in its entirety all year long this past year. So I know you guys are watching. I know you're looking forward to the running back picks that I have available for you guys this week. But what are you going to get, those that are new viewers here at DFS? So one thing's for sure, you're not going to get just 6 or 7 plays, one player per position, and that's basically it. I think it's an unfair, it is a disjustice not only to myself but to my viewers as well, because when I do the research, I know for a fact I'm going to basically target 3 players or more, possibly 4 or 5 per position, but I'm going to always give you guys at least minimum 2 plays and maybe maximum 3, 4, or 5 plays per position if I feel that they are the best possible plays. And the reason I do that is because I leave you guys options. I leave you with the opportunity to be able to set up a lineup according to what platform you play on. Because a lot of us play on DraftKings and a lot of us play on FanDuel, and there are some of us that play on both, like I do. I basically play FanDuel and DraftKings, but most of the time during the course of the year, I play on FanDuel. And on the NFL season, I do play quite a bit of DraftKings as well as FanDuel. So you're going to basically, when I go over the actual plays, they basically are all good for both FanDuel and DraftKings. It's just a matter of you tailoring it to work for you as far as which platform will be the best possible way to go as far as designing a lineup that week with those particular plays. All right. So again, like I've mentioned in the first few videos thus far for the NFL, if you feel that the lineups work better for you on DraftKings, the prices are better, then you do a DraftKings lineup and you fade FanDuel. You don't have to play on FanDuel that week. Okay, and vice versa. If you like that you can design a nice lineup that you feel comfortable with and confident enough, then you'll do it on FanDuel. Then you can fade DK if you want to. Okay, so both places the prices vary. Of course, the PPR comes into really good. It really comes into play really well on DraftKings. Obviously, you get 1 point per reception, so you definitely want to get those dual threat running backs, especially the real good ones, if you can squeeze them in, and as well as focusing on the wide receivers. All right, so enough of all that. So if you have not subscribed as of yet to the channel, please do so down below, and don't forget to put on that bell icon right next to subscribe. Click on that, and this way you'll get that notification as soon as I put up videos. I plan to put up 4 or 5 videos a week. We're going to do individual position videos, and then I'm also going to have a live show every Saturday. Last Saturday was the first live show, me here at DFS Zone covering, and I spent over 2 hours discussing football for Sunday with all you guys out there. I appreciate those that came out. We had a nice time. We discussed the slate, and I was able to answer questions and help those who are fairly new to DFS to hopefully put them in position to have the best possible lineup for Sunday. And of course, the live show will be going on again this Saturday at 7 p.m. So if you don't want to miss that, definitely must subscribe, put on those post notifications, and let's just get busy and let's get it done. Let's make some money. All right, today I'm going to discuss with you what I believe are the best possible plays at running back. I actually had 5 running backs that I really like this week. They are all the backs. You can utilize them both on FanDuel and DraftKings. And before I go over them, Well, actually, let's go over them right now. So I'm going to use the FanDuel software to go over the players. Majority of the time I will. Sometimes I will utilize both and be able to go back and forth and share with you. But as you can see here, Alvin Kamara is definitely a great play. I had him selected last week, and he put up some enormously good numbers. He's going to probably put up very good numbers again this week, but at 9,000, a little pricey. He is actually 9,500 on DraftKings, so he's very, very expensive this week on DraftKings, but I could understand that all on DraftKings. Obviously, with him and Gurley, they're very good dual threat running backs. These guys get a lot of targets as far as receiving the ball, and they know that. And they know that PPR is very important in their website, so obviously they're going to jack up the prices a little bit due to the fact that guys like Alvin Kamara get a lot of receptions. I mean, he gets targeted, probably 8 to 9 times a game. He got targeted, I think, 11, 12 times last week. So he's definitely in play. If you want to pay up for him, that's fantastic. I like paying up for running backs in the main slate, especially large ones like this, 10 or 12 games in the main slate. You definitely want to be able to get the best possible backs, and dual threat running backs are definitely what I enjoy the most. I always try to at least find one, possibly two if I can, even if I had to utilize them in the flex position. It's a good strategy to use here on FanDuel. On DraftKings, totally different. You definitely want to utilize your backs there if you really have an opportunity to in the flex position, and at the same time, you definitely want to utilize those receivers that definitely get targeted a lot. So it's all about matchups and finding out putting the lineup together that is best suited with the allocated money that you have per platform. My first guy that I really like here is Todd Gurley, 8,900. I know he's in the same mold, same kind of position as Alvin Kamara, but at 8,900, he is pricey on DK. He's at 9,200 on DK. But his 2017 stats, and I'm going to base him because it's early on in the year. As we progress during the course of the year, you're going to see me not discuss so much about the 2017 stats. But right now, because it's early on and it's the first time I am going over him as a possible selection, I definitely look back at how he did in 2017. And he was fabulous in 2017. 279 rushes, 1,300 plus yards with 13 TDs. He averaged 87 yards per game. He also had 64 receptions from the backfield, 788 yards, 6 touchdowns, 52.5 yards per game. I mean, he had a 74% catch percentage, which is incredible. I mean, he was utilized a lot. We're talking about over 2,000 all-purpose yards and 19 TDs for this gentleman last year. All right, very, very big year for Todd Gurley. In the red zone, he was pretty darn good too. 62 rushes, 160 yards with 12 TDs, 70% rushing percentage in the red zone. I mean, he's going to be utilized a whole lot in the red zone because he's that explosive. He has 6 receptions in the red zone as well, 52 yards and 4 TDs. Inside the 10, he was just as efficient, 76% catch percentage, 90% catch percentage in the red zone. He had 3 receptions for 13 yards and 2 TDs. He had also 32 rushes for 59 yards and 11 touchdowns, 76% rushing percentage there as well. It even increased higher in the red zone inside the 10. As you can see, when I said he had 12 TDs in the red zone, he had 11 of those inside the 10. So he was utilized a lot more and was more efficient inside the 10-yard line. But again, man, that many opportunities obviously show every time they're going to get in the red zone, if he's getting 70% of the possible targets or the possibilities of the rushes, that is absolutely someone you should always consider. Now it's a matter of, is he in a good matchup? Okay. So far this year, inside the 20, he had 5 rushes last week inside the 20 for 19 yards. And he had 1 reception for 19 yards with 1 TD. He was only targeted twice. Not a whole lot last week as far as scoring, but he definitely did well. He put up 22.2 fantasy points on FanDuel and 26.7 on DK. He had 20 rushes for 108 yards, and he also had 3 receptions for 39 yards and 1 touchdown. All right. So he had a very, very nice first week, and this is a guy that did not play any exhibition games, did not play in the preseason. They're going up against Arizona. Last week, Arizona lost to Washington. They gave up to Arizona. Arizona gave up to Washington 43.4 fantasy points, FanDuel points, to the running back position between Mr. Peterson and Mr. Thompson. They both lit him up. All right. On DK, that was 48.4 DraftKings points, a little bit more there due to the PPR Obviously, you know, you got Mr. Thompson, who's a good receiving back. They utilize him. I love the whole idea of Washington having these two guys back there that they can utilize, one for the run, one that can also run out and can catch passes and be dangerous on the open field like Mr. Thompson. But they had their troubles. Arizona, unfortunately, they have some injuries on the D line, and obviously that's hurting them. They were the sixth best defense in defending the rush last year, and unfortunately this year they're going to have a rough start, and I think they're going to have a rough start here as well with Mr. Gurley. Red zone last year, they were okay, 25th. 59% of the opponents scored a touchdown. So far this year, in that 1 week, 75%. They only had one opportunity. Washington had only one opportunity in the red zone, and they did score in the red zone. So I love Mr. Todd Gurley here. I think he's an excellent play for this weekend's game. My next guy in line here, I do love also Melvin Gordon III. I mean, Melvin Gordon, 8,200, 7,400 on DK, so he's $800 cheaper on DraftKings. His 2017 stats, he had 284 rushing attempts, 1,100 plus yards, 69 yards per game, had 8 touchdowns. He also caught 58 passes last year for 476 yards, 30 yards per game, 4 TDs. He had a total of 12 TDs for the year. All right, 2018, his first game last week, 15 rushes, 64 yards. He also had 9 receptions, 13 targets last week, and he had 9 receptions for 102 yards. The only drawback, he put up all those numbers. The only drawback was that he did not get a touchdown last week, but he put up 30.6 DK fantasy points and 23.1 on FanDuel. Obviously, the 30.6 DraftKings points works well with him on DK for 7,400. As that PPR comes into play again. He's one of those dual threat backs, which I always love. We're moving on. He's playing against, let's put it this way. On the red zone, he was pretty efficient as well in the red zone. Very, very good in the red zone. 49 rushes last year, 107 yards, 7 TDs. He had a 73% rushing percentage. So he's going to get touches when they get in that area. He had 27 receptions for 36 yards and 6 TDs as well in 2017. He also had 8 receptions inside the 10, 62 yards and 4 touchdowns. Overall, he had 11 touchdowns in the red zone last year out of the 12. So that means when he gets in the red zone, Mr. Gordon, just as well as Mr. Gurley, they get a lot of attention. So it's all about the matchups. And man, he has an incredible matchup here. Incredible matchup as he's going up against the Buffalo Bills, who were already, they were just horrible last week. 20 rushes against them last week, 1 TD, 2 targets, did not catch a ball. Sorry about that. He is playing Buffalo, and Buffalo last year, I forgot to tell you this first. Last year he played against Buffalo. Buffalo lost to the Chargers 54-24. They lost by 30. Mr. Gordon had 20 rushes for 80 yards and a touchdown. He did not catch a ball. He had 2 targets, did not catch a reception. But in the red zone in that game, he was 7 rushes for 25 yards, 1 touchdown in the game. He had only 14 fantasy points. Inside the 20 last year, 49 rushes. I mentioned that already. 49 rushes. Inside the 10, 27 receptions, 36 yards, 6 TDs, 73%. Buffalo was ranked 29th in rushing defense last year in the NFL, coughing up 124.6 yards per game to the opponents. And they gave up 22 touchdowns last year to running backs. That was the most in the NFL. And they're going up against Mr. Gordon, who put up 12 last year. So obviously he has an opportunity to get crazy here. Running backs receptions, had 90 receptions against this defense last year for 665 yards and 2 TDs. They coughed up 29.1 DK points to running backs last year, Buffalo, and 25.4 fantasy points to opponents in FanDuel. Thus far this year, after the first game of the season, 24 rushes by running backs, 73 yards, 3 TDs. The same backs in game 1, which is, of course, this is Baltimore last week. 6 receptions, 21 yards, a total of 32.5 DK points last week by Baltimore against these guys. That was the 8th most in the league last week, and 28.5 FanDuel points was the 7th most in the league last week. In the red zone, these guys coughed up 53.4% of the time opponents scored a touchdown every time they got in the red zone. This was last year for Buffalo. This year, 100%, right on the nose. You know how many opportunities Baltimore had last week? They had 6 opportunities in the red zone, and all 6 times they scored. 6 for 6, 100%. So, man, those numbers really, really draws me in, and it tells me that Melvin Gordon is in an excellent spot and a great opportunity to put up 20 to 25 easy. He has that kind of upside. So I see Mr. Gordon having a wonderful game this weekend against the Buffalo Bills. My next guy in line here, I mean, I know that they're kind of high, not high-owned players, but they're kind of, you know, expensive ball players, but they're all in great spots. If you don't want Mr. Gordon, pay $400 more. I think Kareem Hunt is going to have a bounce-back game here. He should. He only had 4.9 fantasy points both on DK and FanDuel last week. You know, I expect him to put up some better numbers. Last week, he had 16 rushes last week for 49 yards. That's basically it. He was non-existent in the pass game, which was a total surprise because last year, he had 53 receptions last year for 455 yards and 3 touchdowns. All right. His catch percentage last year from the backfield was 84%. Now, granted, last year he had Alex Smith. This year he has to deal with Patrick Mahomes. Now, granted, Patrick Mahomes is a dual-threat quarterback. You know, he's one of those ones that likes to run. He can get out of the pocket. He can throw the ball. He has a strong arm, can throw deep. And I think he's built such a great chemistry already with Tyreek Hill. But he has to get Mr. Hunt involved, as well as Mr. Kelsey, because they have so many weapons. Just between Mahomes and the other 3, Hunt, okay, Kelsey, and Hill, they can be very dangerous, Kansas City. They're going to put up points. All right. In the red zone last year, 69% of the time, he had 5 TDs. And inside the 20, he had 36 rushes for 102 yards and 5 touchdowns, 70% rush percentage. That was the 4th best in the league as a rookie. This is his sophomore year. So granted, last week, he wasn't involved in the offense. I expect him to be in the offense. This is a shootout game this week against Pittsburgh. You know, Pittsburgh needs a win. Kansas City did win last week, but they put up a lot of points. I know they're going into Pittsburgh. I know something tells me Pittsburgh is just, you know, this is going to be one of those years that they may have a lot of games where they're going to have some serious battles, and I think they're going to have a battle here. Hunt, 7,800. He is much cheaper on DK, folks. 6,200. Okay, so you definitely want to consider him. Versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, starting off the year after their first game of the season, 31st in the league in rushing. They're near last. That's just to start with, and that was against Cleveland. All right, Cleveland had 38 rushes for 177 yards, and granted, they gave up 77 yards to a dual-threat quarterback named Tyrod Taylor. Taylor had 77 yards, Hyde has 62, Duke Johnson 17, and Nick Chubb 21. Between all those guys, not including Tyrod Taylor, 42.7 fantasy points. Pretty much between all 4 of them, sorry. 42.7 fantasy points, so it leaves a little wiggle room for Mr. Hunt here, who's capable of getting 20 or better. He has done it before. Love him here. The running backs only, 30 rushes, 100 yards, and 1 TD. Obviously, the other 77 yards came from Tyrod Taylor. That's where they stand as far as last week. The running backs had 100 yards, and this is a kid that's capable of getting 100 yards. He's capable of getting 50 or 60, 70 yards from the backfield as a receiver as well. So I could see him having a great game. Last year, Pittsburgh gave up 19.1 fantasy points per game on DK to running backs and 18.1 FanDuel points to running backs. And they're going up against a kid, like I said, who has 20-point upside. So I could see him having a great game here. This is a bounce-back game. I could see Kansas City scoring. I could see this game being a shootout and going 30-plus points each team, and one of them winning it. I know Pittsburgh is favored by 4 at home. I think they have them scoring 28 points and Kansas City 24. But I could see this game getting in the 30s between both teams as well, especially if Roethlisberger is on this week with his boy Antonio Brown. He's going to need Brown, and he's going to need Mr. James Conner. Excuse me. All right. So Kareem Hunt in play, guys. Kareem Hunt in play. My next choice is, coming out of that same game, Mr. James Conner. I think James Conner is in a good spot here as well. You know, you got no Le'Veon Bell. Hey, no problem. You got Mr. James Conner. Mr. James Conner is taking advantage of the opportunity with Mr. Bell gone to show this team that he is ready to step in and be the next top running back for them. You know, it could cause more problems for Pittsburgh, because maybe they may want to just, hey, put up Bell up for a possible trade bait, you know, with James Conner. So if he has another explosive game, which I think he's capable of doing, last week he put up 31 fantasy points against Cleveland in the rain. Horrible conditions from the backfield and even running. So he was beating them with his feet and his hands. 7,000 this week on FanDuel, 6,700, only $300 cheaper on DK. So they know something over there. Obviously, not that big of a difference. So I think he's good either or. You can go either way. Like I mentioned, he had 31.7 fantasy points. He had 31 rushes for 135 yards and 2 TDs. He also had 6 targets. He caught 5 of those for 57 yards. In the red zone, he was pretty effective. 2 rushes, 9 yards, 1 TD. Inside the 10, the same thing, 2 rushes, 9 yards, 1 TD. So bottom line is, when he got inside the 10, he put in that TD. So he was very dangerous from that spot. Last year, man, Kansas City was 25th in the league in rushing defense, giving up 118 yards per game with 15 touchdowns. They also, and I'm pointing this out, they were 29th in pass defense, so they were not good on either side of the defense as far as pass defense or as well as run defense. 247 yards per game given up with 23 TDs. This definitely opens the doors up for James Conner. Those are 2 red flags right there for me. Right away, I put 2 check marks on that. And that's the reason why I'm pointing it out, so you guys know that Kansas City, they got a great offense, but their defense is pretty shabby. So this is why they're going to get into it. Every week they're going to have to put up enough offense to win some ball games. And I think this is a game they're going to need to do that with Pittsburgh, the hostile crowd. They're looking to get a win after a tie last week against Cleveland. It's going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be an exciting game to watch, and it'll be very nice to see how JC here comes out in week two. 2018 stats for Kansas City. 22 rushes they gave up last week, 123 yards. And they're going up against a kid who put up 135 yards last week and 2 touchdowns. Kansas City against running backs last year, 284.2 yards per game, 12 TDs. They gave up 64 receptions to running backs for 513 additional yards and 2 TDs. 22.3 DK points per game again, given up to running backs, and 19.8 FanDuel points per game given up to running backs. This year, 21 rushes, 104 yards, 14 receptions, 189 yards, 1 TD, 54.3 DK points last week. Kansas City gave up in a winning game. Can you believe that? They gave up 54.3 between Gordon and Eckler. For the Chargers, they gave up 54.3 DK points and 44.3 FanDuel points. And this kid put up 31. I mean, he has a shot here to get maybe possibly 30 again. So Mr. Conner for me is in play, man. I really, really like Mr. James Conner here. I think he is someone that us as a community should definitely think about. My last guy that I'm considering for this week, granted, there's a few other guys that I like here, and I'm going to probably discuss more after a little bit more research for Saturday's live show, so make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe down below and put on those post notifications so you do not miss out on that live show. We'll be able to do Q&A and be able to discuss the slate a little bit more and feed off one another. So definitely stay tuned for that. But my last guy here that I really think is in a good spot and could possibly have a great game is Dion Lewis, the former Patriot, playing now for Tennessee. He's 6,500 here on FanDuel. I think that's not a bad price. He's even better on DK. I love him in DK. 5,000 on DK. 5,000 going up against Houston. Last year as a New England Patriot, he had 180 rushes for 896 yards, 6 TDs, 56 yards per game. He also was targeted 35 times. He had a 91% catch percentage last year as a Patriot. 35 targets, 32 receptions, 214 yards, 3 TDs, averaged 13.5 yards per game. Okay, in the red zone, he was pretty good. 35 rushes, 142 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Inside the 10, he was 20 rushes for 70 yards and 6 TDs. 38.5% rush percentage. Now, don't let that number fool you. Obviously, we know with New England, he was not the main guy in the red zone, but he got opportunities. They spread the love around a little bit in New England, as we all know, between Gronk. Last year, they had Amendola. They also have Mr. James White in the backfield, Mr. Lewis. And then you got, Hogan. You got Prescott. You got Dorsett, excuse me. You got a number of guys that they were pretty much sharing the love in the red zone. So this is why that number is 38.5. I think that's good. It's actually better than Mr. James White. So definitely Dion Lewis, and especially with the experience playing in that team and playing in a consistent winner, he brings a lot to this Tennessee Titan team. So I definitely love him here with those numbers. Granted, last week, Houston, they played against Miami. They gave up 16 rushing yards, 16 rushes, 75 yards, 1 TD. Also, they had 5 receptions and 35 yards against them for 19.5 FanDuel points and 22 FanDuel points on DK versus running backs. Okay? That was against New England. Those numbers, Lewis, those were his numbers last week versus Miami. Sorry about that. Mr. Lewis versus Miami. 16 rushes, 75 yards, 1 TD. He also had 8 targets for 5 receptions, 35 yards, and 19.5 fantasy points. He had a very nice week. Now, granted, he's playing against Houston. Houston last season, Houston gave up 109 yards per game, 14 TDs to their opponents. That was 13th in the league, middle of the pack, not too bad in defense. In the red zone, they were 25th. 75% of the time, the opponents got in the red zone, they scored a touchdown, and they were averaging 2 TDs every time they played and they scored. So definitely an area of concern for Houston, and definitely a nice area for Mr. Dion Lewis because he is pretty good in the red zone. All right, so I love Mr. Lewis here in this matchup. And think about it, last game for Houston, they played against New England. They gave us 64 yards to Burkhead, okay, 38 yards in receptions. They gave up a total of 122 yards last week between Burkhead, between White. And that's not, these guys are not that explosive. You got a guy like Lewis who is capable of being explosive. I really like Dion Lewis here in this matchup, man. I think that he could be very, very dangerous. Not only that, you're looking at as many DK points, man. When you have Buffalo giving up 29 DK points to running backs, it's definitely a concern. So Dion Lewis, who had 22 pretty much last week on DK, going up against Buffalo, who gave up pretty much 50. What did he give up? They gave up 29 DK points last week, and 25 on FanDuel. So I like those chances. I like those chances, man. So that's pretty much what I'm at with as far as running backs for this week, man. I am definitely. There are definitely a couple of guys more that I like. That are in good positions too. Like I like the Washington Redskins, Chris Thompson. He may be someone that we could be looking at for Saturday on the live show. I will discuss maybe a little further. Christian McCaffrey may be a possibility. So I like those 2 guys right there. Those are possible 2 more that I was looking at. I kind of faded, but I'm going to probably do a double check. Chris Thompson, definitely someone that I really think is in a good matchup here against Indianapolis, excuse me. And bearing any news, I mean Coleman. I think Devontae Freeman is okay. Is he? Well, it says questionable, so watch out for that. I think the last I heard yesterday was that he is probably pretty good to go. But if it was any setbacks for Mr. Freeman, you could possibly have a play in Coleman. And watch out for Austin Eckler, man. He had a nice game off the bench last week. Eckler could be a possible play too. He had 5 rushes for 39 yards, and he had 5 targets. He caught all 5 for 87 yards, put up a 21 fantasy points. So Mr. Eckler could be a nice little value play. And watch out for Sonny Mitchell. Sonny may get some play here, especially if Burkhead, who has a concussion, supposedly didn't practice on Wednesday. So we'll have to monitor that. So again, all that will be covered on the live show. Again, guys, man, drop a like on the video. Let's get 70 likes, man. Let's go. Let's get it done. And on top of that, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe down below. Turn on those post notifications. This way you'll get those videos right away. You'll get the alert right away. You won't miss out on any videos, and you won't miss out on the live show where we'll be able to discuss a little bit further any injury news, any changes in the possible 4 or 5 plays I give you. And like I said, I always look to see if there's any more possible value plays coming forward into Saturday. This is why I do the live show the day before, and we could discuss the slate and at the same time be able to determine what are the best possible plays other than these that I share with you today. So again, subscribe down below. I'll see you guys on the next video. Next video, we got the receivers. All right, best possible receiver plays for this week. Week 2 is coming right up. Everybody have a blessed day, and your boy Manny